Before he was Augustus, before he was emperor, he was simply Octavian, sickly boy, soft-voiced, more scholar than soldier. Not the kind of boy Rome expected to rule it. And yet in this fragile youth, Caesar saw something. It's not a strength of body, but strength of mind, cold calculation behind gentle eyes. Octavian was patient, observant. Where others lunged for glory, he waited, studied the theater of power, and he understood it. So when Caesar named his heir, he chose this quiet boy, this shadow, Octavian. And in that moment, the course of Rome was set. When Julius Caesar fell, Rome thought the story ended. But power does not die with a man. It lingers, restless, waiting for its next vessel. And into that void stepped not a warrior, not a statesman, but a boy. His name was Gaius Octavius, Caesar's great nephew, too young to matter, too fragile to fear. But Caesar's will revealed something astonishing. He had named Octavian as his adopted son and heir. Not a seasoned general, not a senator, a teenager plucked from obscurity. The Senate laughed. Mark Antony sneered. How could this child inherit Caesar's empire? But Octavian understood something no one else did. He didn't need strength. He didn't need legions. He had Caesar's name. And with that name came loyalty. With that name came money. With that name came destiny. As Antony whipped the people into rage, Octavian stood in the shadows, watching, learning. Antony wanted chaos. Octavian wanted control. And in that moment, the boy made his first decision as Caesar's heir. He would not fight Antony's fire with fire. He would fight with ice, cold patience, cold alliances, cold revenge. The senators thought him weak. Antony thought him harmless. But in truth, Octavian was building something no one could see. Not an army of soldiers. An army of promises, whispers, debts, secrets. The Republic had killed his father in all but blood. Octavian would return the favor, slowly, silently, until Rome itself bent the knee. Mark Antony was everything Octavian was not. Charismatic. Seasoned in war, a lion who had fought beside Caesar, Antony believed Rome belonged to him. But Octavian, the boy, understood a deeper truth. Lions are predictable. Foxes survive. He moved carefully, gathering Caesar's veterans, not through speeches, not through glory, but through promises. He swore vengeance for Caesar. He swore rewards. And the soldiers, old and weary, saw in him not a boy, but a ghost of Caesar returned. When Antony grew too powerful, Octavian aligned with the Senate. When the Senate faltered, he turned back to Antony. To his enemies, Octavian offered friendship. To his friends, suspicion. Every move designed to make Rome believe he was weak. While his enemies destroyed each other, he watched Cicero attack Antony with words sharper than swords. Octavian said nothing. He let others speak. He let others bleed. He let others die. And then, when Antony seemed cornered, Octavian switched sides. The boy everyone underestimated now forced the Senate, with his legions at his back, to make him consul. At 19 years old, it was unthinkable. The Republic had mocked him as a child. Now, he sat in its highest office, because Octavian understood the first rule of power. You don't win by being stronger. You win by being necessary. And so, Rome's lion and Rome's fox stood together uneasily, bound by a single purpose: to hunt down Caesar's killers. Brutus and Cassius had thought they saved the Republic by killing Caesar. What they had truly done was give birth to Augustus. 2 years after Caesar's death, the world held its breath. On one side, Brutus and Cassius, the liberators. On the other, Antony, the lion, and Octavian, the fox. The battle for Rome's soul was about to begin. Antony fought with fire, as always. But Octavian? He collapsed, sick, afraid. Hidden in his tent, as others clashed steel on the battlefield, his enemies whispered, "This is no general. This is Caesar's shadow, and nothing more." But war is crueler than courage. Confusion spread. Cassius believed his side lost, and in despair he fell on his own sword. Brutus held longer. The philosopher general. But philosophy doesn't stop legions. When Antony pressed, when Octavian's legions advanced, his army crumbled. Brutus followed Cassius into death. And so Caesar's murderers lay dead. The Republic, leaderless. But in the silence after Philippi, Antony's legend only grew. He was Rome's greatest soldier, while Octavian, weak, sickly, untested, seemed little more than an accessory. Yet Octavian was learning something Antony never would. That power is not proven on the battlefield, it is proven in the shadows. In the Senate, in the hearts of Rome's weary citizens. While Antony chased glory in the east, Octavian stayed in Italy. He buried the dead, paid the soldiers, he walked the streets. And slowly, Rome began to whisper. Perhaps the boy was not a boy at all. After Philippi, Rome belonged to two men, Antony, master of the East, Octavian, master of the West. Together, they ruled. Together, they could not last. Antony sought glory in the East. He wrapped himself in silk. He drank with Cleopatra, dreamed of new empires beyond Rome. Octavian stayed home. He listened. Two soldiers without land, two citizens without bread, two senators tired of war, and in every complaint, he found a weapon. Octavian built power not in palaces, but in promises. He cast himself as Rome's savior, while Antony, drowning in the East, became Rome's villain. They tried peace. They even became family, through Octavian's sister. But peace with Antony was smoke, because behind his back, Octavian sharpened the knife. One day, Octavian unveiled Antony's will. A betrayal, he claimed. That Antony would give away Rome itself to a foreign queen. The city gasped. Rome's heart hardened, against Antony, against Cleopatra. Octavian did not beat Antony in battle. Not yet. He beat him in the minds of Rome. By the time war was declared, it was not Antony versus Octavian. It was Antony and Cleopatra versus Rome itself. September 31 BC, the Bay of Actium. On one side, Octavian's fleet, lean and disciplined, commanded by Agrippa. On the other, Antony and Cleopatra. Hundreds of ships, heavy, imposing, but weighed down by indecision. For hours, the two sides circled, neither willing to commit. The wind shifted, the sea groaned. And then, fire. The battle erupted. Antony's massive ships struggled to maneuver. Octavian's smaller vessels darted like wolves, ramming, burning, breaking them apart. And then, the unthinkable. Cleopatra, with her fleet, broke formation. Her sails caught the wind. She fled the battlefield. Antony saw her leaving, and in that moment, choice and fate intertwined. He abandoned the fight. He abandoned his army. He abandoned Rome itself, turned his ship, and followed Cleopatra. Actium was not just a battle, it was a surrender. Surrender of power, of reputation, of empire. From that day, Antony and Cleopatra were not rulers. They were fugitives. And Octavian, it was Rome's destiny. In Alexandria, whispers spread. The mighty Antony, broken. The queen of Egypt, cornered. Octavian advanced. The world knew the end was coming. Antony drank. He raged. He remembered battles once won, and saw only losses. His friends deserted him. His legions surrendered. Cleopatra, ever the strategist, kept her distance. She spoke of negotiations, of survival. But Antony saw only betrayal. When Octavian breached the city, Antony was told falsely that Cleopatra was dead. He chose to follow her into death. But the wound was clumsy, slow. His soldiers carried him to Cleopatra's chamber, bleeding. He collapsed at her feet. He whispers his last words.
"Do not mourn me. Secure your crown."
And then silence. But Cleopatra understood. Her crown was already lost. Octavian wanted her alive. A trophy, paraded through Rome in chains. And that was a fate she would never allow. On August 12th, 30 BC, Cleopatra grasped her final weapon. Not armies, not ships. not lovers. But death itself, she died as she lived, on her own terms. And with her, the Ptolemaic dynasty ended. Rome would never again fear Egypt. Octavian stood alone. The Republic was dead. And from its corpse, an empire was born. With Cleopatra's death, the game ended. Egypt, Rome's oldest rival, was finished. Octavian did not weep. He did not rage. He simply collected what was his. The treasures of the Ptolemies, the grain that fed half the Mediterranean, and the children of Cleopatra, paraded as symbols of his mercy and his power. Back in Rome, he celebrated the greatest victory of his age. But it was not just a victory over Egypt. It was the final nail in the Republic's coffin. The Senate hailed him as Augustus, the first emperor of Rome. Cleopatra was gone. Antony was gone. Caesar was long dead. Octavian, quiet, patient, ruthless, stood alone. From Alexandria's ashes, an empire was born. Rome, once a republic, now bent to one man's will. Octavian, the boy who outplayed every general, the heir who avenged Caesar, the survivor who buried all rivals. But power never comes without a cost. To hold Rome, Octavian would have to become something new, something greater, and something far more dangerous. This is not the story of a man. This is the story of the first emperor, the man Rome called Augustus. Augustus ruled longer than any who came before him. 40 years as princeps, the first citizen. He rebuilt Rome from brick to marble. He wrapped tyranny in the language of tradition. He gave the Republic a funeral, disguised as rebirth. They called it the Pax Romana, the Roman peace, a golden age born from the chaos of civil war. But peace, under Augustus, was not the absence of war. It was the silence that followed victory. In Spain, he crushed the Cantabrian tribes, a long, brutal war, fought until the last strongholds fell. In Gaul and the Alps, he fortified Rome's grip, binding conquered lands with stone roads and walls that would outlast centuries. To the east, he turned to Parthia, not with legions, but with diplomacy. The lost standards of Crassus, symbols of Roman humiliation, returned without a single spear thrown. So Augustus ruled not through endless conquest, but through careful balance. Rome had enough land. What it needed was order, peace through power, stability through fear, and the silence of the world, bowing to Rome. August 19th, 14 CE, in the small town of Nola, Rome's first emperor closes his eyes for the last time. He is 75. The wars are long behind him, Republic long buried. The official story? Augustus dies of age, after a life of triumph. But whispers tell another tale, that Livia, his wife, hastened his end, to clear the way for her son Tiberius. In his final hours, Augustus asked not for priests, not for generals, but for mirrors. He had his hair combed, his robes straightened, his face arranged. Even at the edge of death, he understood. Power was theater. For more than 40 years, he had played his role, savior, father, emperor. Now came his last scene. With a faint smile, he turned to his friends and whispered. His final words echo like lines on a stage.
Have I played my part well? Then applaud as I exit.
Then, like an actor exiting the stage, Augustus was gone. The Senate deifies him. Divus Augustus. Not a man, but a god. But gods do not bleed. And Rome remembers. Augustus was no god. He was the man who ended a republic and built an empire from its ashes. And that empire would carry his shadow for centuries.